The Vanguard to Ascensus Solo 401k transition. Watch this before making your first contribution. Hi, this is financial planner Sean Mullaney. Let's discuss. So the Vanguard Solo 401ks have been transferred to Ascensus, and now Solo 401k owners have to get used to the Ascensus platform. And I think you got to be intentional. You want to do some thinking before you make that first contribution to your Ascensus Solo 401k. And there are two defaults in the Ascensus system when it comes to Solo 401k contributions that I think most Solo 401k owners are going to want to change. So let's go through them. I got a little roadmap for our video. We'll talk about contributions, defaults, and then some advice, practical advice for going forward. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to think about is the investment allocation on any contributions made to the Solo 401k. So if you look at what Ascensus has set up, they have a system where they have a default for how contributions to the Solo 401k are invested. And unless you only had one fund coming from Vanguard to Ascensus, that default is probably not going to be the right answer in most cases. And look, I'm not giving you investment advice. I'm just saying there's a default in the system that you probably don't want, right? So here's what's going on. Say you had two funds or three funds distributed between traditional Solo 401k, Roth Solo 401k, doesn't matter. What Ascensus does with your future contributions that you make in the Ascensus portal is it defaults those contributions ratably based on what you brought over from Vanguard. So unless that's exactly what you want to make your contribution into with your new contributions, you probably want to take an affirmative step before you make your first contribution to go into the system and change the investment allocation for the contributions. And I'll walk you through how you do that. And you probably want to do that before each contribution you make in the future, just as sort of good hygiene with your Solo 401k and making sure, hey, I'm putting this $10,000 in my Solo 401k. I intend that it's invested in this particular fund or these particular funds this way. You should probably be doing that affirmatively before you make the contribution. All right, so what you should do is go into your employer portal in the Ascensus system. And you're going to get a little green top menu like this one here. You go to employee and then you select an employee. So this one here. And then it'll put you to a page and then you select yourself on the next page. It's a Solo 401k, surprise, surprise. Okay, so that's the first step. The next step is you need to hit the Navigate to drop-down button, all right, and then pick Investment Allocations. And that's the page where you're going to see, first of all, how they're going to default it. And my guess is it may not be what you want. And then it'll have the little menu, the little boxes for each fund, and you can allocate your next contribution however you want. 100% to this fund, or 10% to each of these 10 funds, or 75% in one fund and 25% in the next fund. That way you get to affirmatively pick where the money's going to get invested when you contribute it to the Ascensus Solo 401k. So definitely before you make that first contribution, review the default, and you're probably going to want to change it for the investment allocation on the contribution. Second thing to change, or at least tinker with or think about, is contribution date for your contributions. So what's going on here? The Ascensus system defaults to New Year's Eve as the contribution date. The Ascensus system is totally different from Vanguard in this rule. Here, what you got to do is you're probably going to want to create a new quote-unquote contribution date, probably today. If you're making your contribution in October of 2024, say, you probably want it going into the Solo 401k today so you get as much tax-deferred or tax-free growth on it as possible. You probably don't want to wait till New Year's Eve for that money to actually go from the bank account into the Solo 401k. So you've got to create a new contribution date in the Ascensus system, and I'll walk you through that here. All right. The first thing you do is you click the button that says manually enter contributions. Okay, that's easy enough. And then you're going to see this thing. It's going to say contribution date, and it has two defaults: December 31st, 2023, December 31st, 2024. What you're going to want to do is add a contribution date. You click this button right here, add a contribution date, and there you manually, it'll come up with a little calendar function thing, and you just select today's date. Now, maybe you want to do it for next week. So you select, a week from today, or 2 days from today, or 10 days from today, whenever it is, you decide. But if you don't decide, it's going to default to New Year's Eve, which you probably do not want. All right, let's keep going. And then once you've established a new contribution date in the system, then you got to select the employee, i.e. you probably, who you want to make the contribution for. So what you do is after you've created that new date, you go to this Add Employee button and you drop it down, and it'll say search for existing employee. You should be in the system. So you hit search for existing employee, and then there'll be a search bar. You just type in your last name, it'll come up, and from there you actually make the contribution into the Ascensus Solo 401k. So I've got a little bit of advice for Ascensus Solo 401k owners going forward. And look, this is not investment advice or tax advice for your situation, but more sort of how do we actually go about this type of advice. So the first thing is this. You need to understand that the Ascensus system is not intuitive when it comes to making contributions. So if I was new to Ascensus, what I would likely do is I would strongly consider calling Ascensus and talking to the representative and saying, look, I'm about to make my first contribution to the Ascensus Solo 401k. I want it for today's date. I want it going in this particular fund or these 3 particular funds in this proportion, and it's this amount, and it's traditional or it's Roth, or maybe there's 2 contributions, whatever it is. If I were making my first contribution, I would pick up the phone. I'd say, look, I understand it's a new system to me. Can you please help me walk through it? I think they're going to be, you got to figure out what the experience is like, but my hope is that the experience would be good. But yeah, why not have the agent on the phone with you while you're doing this for the first time? I think that makes all the sense in the world. And then the second thing is, sometimes we just think, contribute to the Solo 401k, contribute to the Solo 401k. And sometimes I think it makes some sense to step back and to get some education and just think these things through. What are the Solo 401k tactics and options out there? How should I be thinking about my plan? And I have a resource for that. My book, Solo 401k, the Solopreneur's Retirement Account. I self-published it in 2022. It's a resource out there for those of you looking for more information about Solo 401ks, thinking about how you maintain your plan and those sorts of things. I think sometimes it's good just to step back and say, I want to make a $10,000 contribution to my Solo 401k. Great, but to what end and why are we doing that? And how, maybe just think about it a little bit. So my book's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other places. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please mash that like button and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.